Perfect. Now, good morning, everybody. So welcome. We have a special closed session today before our usual scheduled board meeting. So we have one item that is our interviews for the new executive director position, item 4.1. Let's go ahead and start with public comment. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, sir.
Like the hat.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, which is a underprivileged, disadvantaged district on the urban fringe of Santa Rosa. A lot of folks don't know it, but a good spot to know. I'm here today because I'm hoping that as you go forward with the hiring of the new director, thank you for this director and all her hard work during your time here, you hire somebody for less. It's a revolutionary process. Actually lower the costs for what we're doing. This good director came in through working have other administrative places and other bureaucratic situations. You can find another administrator familiar with bureaucratic situations without having to give them a big package at the beginning saying you're going to be at the top. You should be looking to cut your costs. Right now, you're talking about the idea of going out for a tax. It's not going to work. I was at some big get-togethers the last few days, and most folks are not really supportive of any increases in taxes. They're not really supportive of different groups such as this in a way, which is an agency that seeks to do behavioral change. And I got to thinking as I came in, I didn't ride my bike today. I got hit a couple of times the last couple of years. I don't ride it much anymore. But I bet almost everybody in here came in a private vehicle, a single occupancy situation. None of you carpooled probably. Everybody's worried about parking rather than what you're going to be actually, changing with your efforts from this agency. I've been coming to its meetings since its beginning and the Regional Climate Protection Authority too. One of the most difficult things is to rein in expenses. You can do that right now with the hiring of the next person by saying, you know what, we're not going to give you the fat package. You don't have to give anybody a fat package. This is a really good job for somebody. They'll be a millionaire by the time they leave this job. So keep that in mind. The taxpayers are looking at things. There's different agencies seeking to get more taxes on this next election ballot, and it's not going to work. People are not going to be supportive of that stuff, and they want to see that you, as our elected representatives and our financial oversight people, would have more of a hard-headed fiscal oversight to what's occurring and not allow the constant inflationary situation in wages. A lot of people are out there struggling right now. Inflation is hitting them hard at the grocery store. So don't let them hit it hard at the administrative level on your executive hiring. I was just thinking of Misty Arias over at the Ag and Open Space. She started there right after college, worked on up. You can get yourself somebody with a basic master's degree, somebody that's going to be able to do all this. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your ride home.
Thanks, Dwayne.
I'll be back at this session.
We'll see you at 2:30. Drew, any hands on Zoom?
No hands on Zoom.
Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and recess into closed session.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've seen that before a few times.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to go ahead and resume our regular board meeting. Drew, if you could call the roll.
Alrighty, good afternoon. We'll start with Director Melanie Bagby.
Present.
Director Janice Cater-Thompson.
Present.
Director Chris Corsi. Here. Director Gerard Giudice had let me know he would not be here today. Director Susan Harvey.
Here.
Director Nisa Hinton.
Here.
Director Ariel Kelly.
Here.
Director Sandra Lowe.
Here.
Director David Rabbit. Here. Director Rosa Reynosa.
Here.
Vice Chair Linda Hopkins.
Present.
And Chair Chris Rogers.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you so much. We met in closed session this morning for about 4 hours to do interviews for the next executive director position. Direction was given to staff, but no action has formally been taken. Something may appear on the next agenda or a subsequent one for official board approval at that point. But again, no direction was taken. Let's go to our public comment for items not on the regular agenda for today's meeting.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. DeWitt.
Hello.
Do we have a microphone for public comment?
Thank you kindly. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, an underprivileged, disadvantaged district on the urban fringe of urbanizing Santa Rosa. 6 years ago, a book came out called Drawdown from the New York Times, talking about some climate approaches to making things better for the future. I do hope that you've had a chance to look into these types of things, because although most of what you're about is spending money, there are approaches where things can be done without necessarily spending some extra money. One of them is called Protect Trees. Now, it's been about 30 years I've been involved in an effort to try to save trees in Roseland, our area. We have a riparian corridor, and along that corridor, we have a natural tree area. We've worked hard to try to save it. And one of the things we have to save it from is jurisdictional agencies, their expansion with development and growth. So in this book Drawdown, they point out that afforestation, reforestation, and regeneration forestry are helpful things to do in this climate crisis, as it's now called. So I bring your attention to a little letter that's in your packet today from Mr. Rogers going to Mr. Dodd and Mr. McGuire, in which he points out in your packets, page 34, that it's a good thing to have urban forests, tree planting, green roofs to sequestration, increase sequestration, reduce urban heat island effects. That's what we've been trying to do over in Roseland for decades. And one of the most difficult things of all is to keep developers and governmental agencies from putting in more pavement. Now, an agency like yours might think, well, hey, we got to have the pavement because we're all about transportation. But you could actually be helping on the urban heat island effect by having less pavement being put in places and pulling up pavement where it already is in some places. At the same token, you're thinking, well, this guy comes here and he advocates for projects also, the Hearn Avenue interchange, for example. Well, it's called judicious use of where you put your impermeable surfaces. If you're going to put down asphalt and concrete, make sure that it's not going to worsen the climate situation for the people who live in certain areas. You speak about resiliency and sustainability. So one of the things you could do is help the people in communities who try to save their trees, who try to have what might be called a neighborhood. I've spoken about that here before in front of other bodies also. Neighborhoods only come about because community members save the trees from the destruction of developers and various jurisdictional agencies that would take them out. We once had a scenic road, Burbank Avenue in Roseland. It took us years to get it designated by the city. And then afterwards, the county and Roseland School District ignored the designation and cut down most of the tree tunnel along our scenic road. So if we're going to have any of these positive things that you guys talk about occur, has to start with you. Thank you kindly.
Thank you so much, Mr. DeWitt. Anybody else for public comment? Okay, let's move on then to our consent calendar. We have items 7.1 through 7.4, both the SCTA and RCPA items. Are there any questions from the board? All right, I'll take public comment on the consent calendar.
Yes, sir. 7.3. All right. Microphone. Who's got the microphone? They rarely let me touch a microphone at public meetings, so thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. Item 7.3 in the executive summary, it mentions the Hearn Avenue interchange project. Most of you probably don't know that there's been discussions about that for close to 30 years. 25 years ago, over in Roseland, we were specifically having meetings about the Hearn Avenue improvements because there was a widening of Hearn Avenue, which at the time was a 2-lane rural road. 1999, the city of Santa Rosa decided they would do a Southwest Santa Rosa redevelopment project area. When they decided to do that, there was an elected project area committee in which myself and other members of the community came forward as volunteers and worked on the discussions about the Hearn Avenue interchange project. This is 25 years trying to get this project to get finished. You folks hopefully can speed it up. I see there's been some rearranging of money, different discussions about how things will go. This needs to be the priority in many, many ways. I know Highway 37 is a big thing, but the Hearn Avenue interchange is a really important situation. And if this organization, Fremier Enterprises, is getting paid to help make this happen, let's get it done. We've already been paying them to get some things done, and it's just not happening in our watch, it looks like. So I'm coming forward under consent items to ask for that to occur. And I also hope, excuse me, that you'll begin the process of looking into a Bellevue Avenue interchange as they annex Moreland Avenue and they build out Santa Rosa Avenue and South Santa Rosa. Going to need some more interchanges and ways to get across that freeway. Thank you kindly for your time. Microphone back before my time is there.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other comments on the consent calendar? All right, I'll bring it back and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Director Rabbit, and a second from the Vice Chair. Any additional discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries. Let's move on to item 8.1. That's our climate protection initiative. Madam Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last discussion around this, we had the poll results, and there was a desire to come back and have sort of a more encompassing discussion about what the landscape of local tax measures in Sonoma County is currently, where there might be gaps related to our needs associated with climate change, and what options are available for addressing those gaps and advancing our climate goals. So the staff report lays out a few pieces of information, and then the goal hopefully today is to have a discussion with the board about what that means and how we should proceed. So as of September, there are 6 countywide transaction and use taxes or sales taxes and 9 city level sales taxes in 7 of the cities. So sales tax rates range from 8.5% to 9.5%, depending on what a jurisdiction has done locally. The sales tax cap is set at 10.25%, though that expanded cap does expire in 2026. So the staff report shows you the countywide taxes as well as the local jurisdictions, the cities that have passed measures. And then it also highlights 2 measures that we anticipate being before voters in 2024. In March of 24, it is anticipated there will be a 0.5-cent sales tax related to fire protection. And in March of 2024, it is anticipated there will be a 1/4-cent sales tax related to childcare and children's health. If both of those are successful, then we would reach our countywide cap at 10.25. So I did want to highlight a slight typo in the next paragraph, or the first paragraph on the next page. So to take advantage of presidential election cycles, a countywide measure would need to go to voters by 2028. So either the 24 election cycle or the 28 election cycle. And there are a couple of measures that do have a nexus to climate change. I included Go Sonoma in there. We don't need to reauthorize that. That has been done. But SMART, the Ag Preservation and Open Space District, and the Regional Parks measure are the 3 measures that are really germane to climate change, but also are bumping up against an expiration date in the coming years. So I just spent a little time, quick paragraph highlighting what each of those tax measures are focused on, and then sort of bullet pointed some of the places where we see there being some gaps that maybe could be part of a future reauthorization measure for those either smart open space or regional parks or some configuration thereof that would help address climate change more robustly. So it's things like resilient forests, urban forests, resilient buffer zones, grants for farmers for sustainable practices, wetland restoration, comprehensive electrification, efficiency and resilience upgrades, along with expanded EV charging infrastructure, expanded bikeways and safe pedestrian network, and increased transit services, as an example. So some of those are included in the Go Sonoma measure, as you well know, but the needs are great in terms of being able to expand transit service and build out the bike ped network. In addition to the local tax construct, there is significant discussion underway at the state level about a potential climate bond for November of 24. And what that might entail still remains to be seen, but there are two vehicles for that in both the Senate, one in the Senate and one in the Assembly. And the idea was perhaps climate resilience districts, which are the new construct of the state, and we are the first and only one in the state so far, should play a role in that bond. And perhaps funding should be directed to CRDs to not only help us as a CRD, but to encourage their growth throughout the state. And then lastly, just wanted to highlight that cities definitely do have even more authorities to look at different revenue streams, whether it's business taxes or transient occupancy taxes, as I'm sure you're all well aware. But those are sort of the revenue, that's the revenue picture. And I will turn it back over to the chair.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Suzanne. So as the board will remember, when we looked at the polling, the authority that was given was for us to go and see if we saw other opportunities to have the work that was identified by our community groups funded or reflected in other ballot measures, funding opportunities, or policy development. So Suzanne has presented sort of some of those opportunities that exist. Obviously, that's way too much work to do in one item before the board. So I do believe what we're going to be looking for is some authority from the board for the existing ad hoc that's been working on the ballot measure already to go and engage with SMART, with the Ag and Open Space District, to talk about what is their current charge and mission and ability, and are there things that have been identified that would be really critical for climate that we might be able to work with them to get either built into their measure or to expand their scope so that they can continue to do some of that work as well. I'll turn it over and see, you have a question, Melanie?
Question, Suzanne, and this is gonna get down into alphabet soup and a little bit of the weeds here, but I'm just you sort of alluded to it in your initial comments. We have last year's SB 852 from Bill Dodd, and then we also have this new bill SB 867, which looks like it's hopefully progressing. Have there been any discussions about kind of what you were alluding to, which is like, let's make these two work and play well together, because this could possibly be the funding mechanism for I think they have a potential to work and play well together. So
Yes.
does that make sense?
Yes, so we did submit a letter to Senators Dodd and Senators Dodd and McGuire, and have reached out and had preliminary discussion with their staff. So there's definitely more work to do there, but I think Senator Dodd in particular was very interested in the idea of seeing the vehicle he created sort of enhanced by this opportunity.
Yeah, and just with your legislative expertise, this looks like an opportunity to sort of stack benefits and get some additional funding. So what stack benefits and maybe get funding that doesn't require the passage of a sales tax? How feasible do you see that to be? And then how much investigation should we maybe do at this body or ask our other boards and agencies to investigate so that maybe we could get the equivalency of a quarter cent through different funding mechanisms? I don't know, does that make sense?
I mean, I think pursuing some component of a statewide climate bond direct for us is definitely something we should be doing. I'm not gonna lay odds on the legislature's ability and the governor to come to an agreement on what that climate bond is, but I think highlighting the role of local government and how implementation happens here is a key part of that discussion, and having everything be competitive isn't great.
Yeah.
So if climate resilience districts could be a vehicle for getting funds direct to jurisdictions to do the priority projects that matter most to them. So it's not a coastal issue or a valley issue or a fire issue or a flood issue. It's here's money for locals and you know what you need to do when it comes to climate resilience. I think that could be powerful and timely as opposed to propping up other programs or doing more competitive processes.
And then if I just ask a follow-up too, and it's like, what would the timeline really need to be for us to kind of, you know, strategize on this in order to also take advantage to stack with the IRA from the feds?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the timing for getting the legislation passed is, I think, March or the chair might know better than I, but I think it's March or April in order to get something prepared for the November ballot. And then it, I assume, would go into effect January of 25.
Through the legislation would be as late as June.
As late as June, yeah.
The legislature can do it as late as June.
That's Susan?
Yes, it looks like the three groups that you want to kind of partner with, their measures don't stop until 2029 and 2031. Are we thinking that they are going to go early, or especially since you have that 2026 where that cap kind of changes? And if so, are we thinking that they would add a percent on top of theirs? I can't imagine that they're wanting to give away some of the money that they're already getting. Can you speak to that?
So I'll speak to that.
Okay, perfect.
So I think that the likelihood is that you see many of these go in 2026, maybe, but probably 2028, maybe 2024, depending on which one it is and what they're looking at. We always tend to have a better turnout and a more friendly turnout for things like climate in a presidential election. So I think that that's what we're thinking. We also know that many of these groups believe in addressing climate change. So if there's a nexus, and I'll use the Ag and Open Space District, for instance, if there's a nexus between the work that they're currently doing and the carbon sequestration work, for instance, that we would like to be doing, that might give them the opportunity to expand their scope and go after additional grants that doesn't necessarily cut into what they're currently getting, but could enhance and amplify and bring in additional resources as well. Because right now, something like carbon sequestration, probably there's a lot of room for us to do better across the county on that. So I'm just going to use that as an example.
Thank you.
And if I could, just through the chair, we do have Misty Arias from the Ag and Open Space District and Bert Whitaker from Regional Parks, who are here today listening in on the discussion. And we have had conversations with them.
Yeah.
They didn't just happen to drop by.
They heard it was really cool here.
Since you opened the door, the temperature has gone up another 40 degrees.
Yeah, that's great.
It doesn't work.
Ariel, then I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I wanted to just touch on, I think my feeling around the work of RCPA and what we've been doing thus far in convening around those specific issue areas, and that I do see both benefit to playing that convening role, bringing agencies together, talking about who's doing what within our region and who's best suited to propel that work forward. And also the role of RCPA being similar to what the work we're doing with SCTA is that we're able to leverage local and regional dollars to go after bigger, larger pots of money. And so I think that if we were able to engage our partners, some of whom are in the room and some of whom are represented on this board as in SMART directors, I think that there is a really beneficial role that RCPA plays in that space to navigate. We'd like to receive funding from these other sales tax measures, but also that we can take those funds and go out and actually grow their pot of money. And I don't necessarily think that I sit on the Ag and Open Space Fiscal Oversight Commission, so I can speak to that work. Like, we don't always look externally for funding in the ways that SCTA does and RCPA does. And so I think there could be some really great opportunities for synergy there. And then also with respect to the overall sales tax landscape, I had a question about that 2026 deadline when it reverts to the 9.25% and who sets that ceiling, and if there's discussion about it potentially going back up again.
I do believe that's state law, and we had special legislation that was introduced and passed a couple of years ago by Senator McGuire to increase that cap. I think it was for specific purposes, though, transportation, fire.
It was for, Corey probably could answer this, but it's city, county, and SCTA are the three entities that have the ability to exceed the cap.
And
that sunsets, that legislation sunsets.
And so there is an opportunity to
Yes.
request, future legislation.
do we know if there are other jurisdictions who have those similar, so it's common?
Yeah.
Santa Clara, Los Angeles, Alameda, I think. There are several.
Yeah, I do think the concern, what I see in the polling, is that if we can find a way to your word about synergy, find ways to work together to bring in additional resources without adding tax burden, I feel like that's what the polling is showing we're going to be the most successful getting buy-in from our communities with. Sandra and then Chris.
So just to bring to people's attention, most of you know about this because you heard me talk about it at our city meeting, that there is a constitutional amendment that's working its way through the Senate right now to lower the threshold for passing bonds and special taxes. And should that be placed on the ballot and then pass, we would have other avenues to explore, which may, certainly in the housing arena, it is, would be important, but also infrastructure. So, right, as of today, it got out of Senate Elections Committee. It's in appropriations, it's ACA 1, and we'll see what happens. But I know that a lot of jurisdictions are looking at it, and should something happen with that, I think there'll be more action in the next, people won't wait till 2028. Let's put it that way.
I just want to make sure that we're clear about what's being discussed here today, and I'm not sure that I am. So you're not asking necessarily for ag and open space in their next iteration of the tax measure to turn over a part of that to SCTA or RCPA. I'm not asking SMART that or Parks that, but you're looking at potentially those organizations changing their scope to be maybe throw a wider net toward climate action and resiliency type of work. Is that, am I getting that?
I think that that's fair. And I think we did a lot of community input with our groups on what would it actually mean to address climate change at the scale and with the tools that we needed. That work, we don't want to just go to waste now that we have polling back that shows that doing our own separate additional measure probably isn't viable. But rather what I'm asking for is authority from the board for that ad hoc to take that information and go have a conversation with the other tax measures that exist to say, do you feel like everything that's in here is within your current scope? If not, are you interested in perhaps when you go for renewal, broadening your scope to take in that focus and potentially that additional ability to bring in grants, other types of funding and whatnot?
Okay, and that answers my second question, which is what do you want from us today?
Yeah, I will say this is not a hostile takeover. This is an invitation to the table to have a conversation.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions? All right, let's open it up for public comment.
Thanks, sir. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. As you do your conversations with your groups, hopefully you'll open it up to actually include more of the public in an earlier situation so that you could have what has once been called authentic community engagement in your planning to try to get more taxes. In recent get-togethers with various community members that I've known over the years here in the community, it came to our attention that you folks basically plan in an echo chamber type of environment. You basically talk to the same people about different things that you want, and you're trying to figure out how to get what you want with your groups. And many people in the community feel totally left out. They don't feel like they're a part of it in any way, shape, or form, except when they have to pay their tax bills. And when they go to the store and it's up to 10% on a sales tax, that's really starting to hit their wallets. People are really quite concerned out right now because inflation doesn't look like it's going to be tamed. Things look like they'll actually get worse. And if you're a working family out there trying to get by, it's difficult. And although I've already been a person who once supported a tax recently that measure for the parks, which I came to regret, I won't be supporting any of these taxes increasing. We actually need to find a way to have our taxes become, I guess, more pinpointed and accurate to be spent on the things that you can afford at the time, and then have the taxes be lessened. Let these things expire. I live near the SMART train. I don't see many people on it. I've only used it a couple of times. There's a whole different world out there that you folks don't seem to reach, even though you pay pollsters. And when I ask all the different folks that I run into, veterans groups, community groups, reunions, not a one of them ever tells me that a pollster ever got in touch with them. And I ask about those things. So I'm like, okay, who is actually informing you as you get ready to do what you try to do? Because I think a lot of these taxes aren't going to make it next time. And I think, as I once told the Ag and Open Space District, who I really like, but they need to pray for the best and plan for the worst, because that may not even get reauthorized. So thank you for your time. And I'll be looking forward to a couple more times holding this mic. It's the most unusual day in public government I've ever had.
Thanks, Dwayne. Do we have any additional comments? Great.
All right, so we'll start with Steve Wingerwell first. Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chair Rogers and members. Steve Bertelbaugh with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. It did occur to me that repurposing the money that we currently have is probably the most reliable way of accomplishing what we need to accomplish. And then it hits me that in the area of transit, the Air Resources Board is asking us to double the amount of available transit in the next 7 years. I don't think you can buy enough buses to do that in the next 7 years, but it does present the fact that there are areas where we really do need to add to what we're doing. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's not easy. Wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next we have is Tom Conlon. Tom, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Still mute. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity here. I want to underscore the comments of Mr. DeWitt and Mr. Bertelbaugh. As a participant in those ad hocs, both on the land and water and buildings ad hocs, we did, you know, explore some of the difficulties of bringing different constituencies in the community together in support of some of the climate measures that we were discussing at that experts table. And so those are going to be significant challenges. In particular, I want to draw the committee's attention, the board's attention, to this whole area of carbon sequestration and the idea that we can do vegetation management. Cutting trees will ultimately lead to a carbon positive net benefit in our county and in the state and in the planet as a whole. There's a lot of research that's being promoted in this area now that is questioning the basic idea that we'll be able to sequester our way to a, you know, to the 2045 goal through interventions in these natural systems. On farms, there's also significant concern about the measurability and the additionality of soil carbon. I just read a paper from the Northeast finding that managed grazing, rotational grazing on organic dairy farms over 20 years, they really weren't able to see any significant carbon soil benefits from rotational grazing practice on organic farms that outweighed the soil conditions that the land actually started with. So it's going to be hard to bring the diverse sets of stakeholders together. I do think it's a good idea to have these existing tax authority agencies expand the scope of their work, their existing work, to address climate issues, but I encourage them to do so with due diligence and attention to this emerging science in these areas and the measurability, so that we can build confidence in the public to support spending money on these things. So thanks for the consideration of those comments today.
Thank you, Tom. Chair Rogers, I do not see any of the members of the public with their hands on Zoom. I also want to acknowledge that we received a pre-submitted public comment from Chris Thomas. I provided that comment to board directors as well as posted it on the SCTA and RCPA websites.
Great. Thank you so much, Drew. And no additional comments from the public. I'll bring it back to the board. Vice Chair. Yes, please.
Thank you. We're sharing here today. So one thing that I wanted to suggest was that in addition to, granting the authority to at least have these, again, not forced hostile takeover conversations, but invitations to collaboration and thinking and partnering and brainstorming, that, maybe we also have some casual conversation about sort of alternative fee structures. Because I feel like one thing that we didn't fully flesh out, and I continue to hear from the equity committee, actually is along the lines of Dwayne DeWitt's comments, which is like, regressive taxes. Eventually things get too expensive. It's hitting working families. And so one idea that has been floated for, actually, it was a predecessor of yours, Ariel, on the Healdsburg City Council, was like a second home tax. And it runs up against sort of state legislative problems. But, the idea of having some kind of a luxury tax that, quite frankly, most people don't pay, and people tend to want to vote in favor of things that they don't have to pay, but that brings them benefits more so than things that they have to pay that also brings them benefits. It just might be worth having kind of a casual conversation around sort of non-sales tax, non-parcel tax revenue streams. And I kind of think that sort of second home, and maybe that could be like climate and affordable housing, because there's a very clear nexus with both of those, and wrapping, public transit and things into that transit-oriented development. So just, I don't know, it'd be nice to sort of give some authority to the ad hoc, and I say this selfishly as a member, to also explore some alternatives in addition to those meetings with our partners. And good Lord, it's hot. I feel like I'm in Alabama or something right now.
Thank you. I agree with all that's been said and support these non-hostile takeovers. I'd like to add to the list. There, as many of you know, in the area, the unincorporated area that's not represented on this panel, taking supervisor's words for it, the Sonoma Developmental Center is going to be developed. And it's, probably the largest parcel that's going to be developed in Sonoma County in my lifetime. And part of the proposal that was going in prior to the builder's remedy proposal that is in there now was for a climate adaptation center to be used on the site. Because it would do a couple of things. I mean, aside from perhaps being an incubator for climate issues, it would also provide another kind of employment in our county that we actually really need. We're pretty dependent on hospitality and other things that are producing a lot of workers that then exacerbate our traveling problem, housing, et cetera. So by putting something other than the boutique hotel or perhaps in addition to the beautiful boutique hotel that will be at the Sonoma Developmental Center, having something that addresses climate, that has the support of this board, might help with some of the folks that have now have authority over that land, and could, it's the biggest piece of property and it's a blank slate. And if we don't get involved in it, if we don't try to somehow advocate for something positive going there, then all we're going to get is more traffic on Arnold Drive. Have you been down there lately since they did the work on the bridge? It's a lot of fun. Put a lot of tapes on your audio thing. So that would help a lot. It'll help the climate. It will provide jobs in the area. It will give an alternative to the people. And there's people who are already working on it, and it's already like a thing. It's not like you have to come up with it. So I would like to add that to the list. It doesn't cost us anything. It fits into our goals. And it would be great to have this body come on board with that proposal. Thank you.
David?
No, thank you very much. And appreciate the discussion. It was said earlier that every jurisdiction in the county has declared a climate emergency. So I assume that every jurisdiction in the county has also then taken actions as a result of that. I know the county has. We have at least time limited, but 10 people in a climate resilience office. I think that's whatever we call it. With implementation, the climate resilience is one of the pillars of our strategic plan. And I believe that those 10 people and that plan is a result of a $10 million investment. So I think what we really truly need is really that coordination. And I know that comes at a cost if it's done through this body. But if the polling, which I do think the polling is accurate because it kind of mirrors what's other polls that have been proven accurate reflects. I think that that coordination, perhaps through the county, speaking as one, or in a joint way, if it truly is a priority, then we need to prioritize that. And you usually prioritize things by putting some money up front, at least to coordinate the actions, or to share that information that we're all doing probably independently anyway.
Any additional comments? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We'll do next steps.
Very well. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Drew. We'll go on then to item 8.2. It's Plan Bay Area 2050.
Closer to the back. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. So while Drew cues that up, I'll just provide a brief introduction on the presentation today. I'll be providing an update on the Regional Transportation Plan, Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus. So as many of you know, the plan officially kicked off earlier this summer, and MPC has indicated that it's their intent that it'll be a limited and focused update, which will build on the work completed as part of assembling Plan Bay Area 2050. Thank you. So part of this limited update is updating major transportation projects that are included in the plan and identifying new major projects that should be added as regional priorities. And we do have slides up there now. So here's a high level look at the schedule for updating the list of transportation projects in the plan. Earlier this year, staff worked with MPC and local project sponsors to review the list of projects that are included in the RTP, and we updated project costs, project timelines, and descriptions as the projects have changed over time. Over the past few months, we've worked with the TAC and the Transit TAC to gather new project proposals. Today, I'm bringing a proposed list of major projects for your review and approval, and we'll forward your recommendations on to MPC for consideration. Over the next year, MPC staff will evaluate the project proposals, update small project information and programmatic categories, provide future revenue estimates, and work with us to finalize the project list. I expect we'll have plenty of additional opportunities to provide feedback and recommendations on the list during this next year. But the final schedule for adopting the project list is adoption by next summer, July 2024. So when considering new project submissions, there are a number of things to keep in mind. One is that most smaller projects, a lot of projects here in Sonoma County are covered under programmatic categories. And I'll talk a little bit about that, what that means in another slide. But most of these smaller projects don't necessarily need to be added as separate RTP projects in the plan. Projects that don't need federal, state, or regional funding, or that don't require federal or state action, such as air quality conformance analysis, NEPA or SEQA review, or any of those types of actions within the next 4 years, don't need to be added either. Submitted projects should be actively advancing with local funds. And if they aren't active right now, we'll have a chance to do this again in 4 years. So the RTP is updated every 4 years, and there's a cycle and plenty of chances to add projects as they change and they move forward towards implementation. So any submitted project should be operational by 2050. One thing that MTC is really emphasizing is that transportation revenues are expected to be lower this planning cycle with higher unmet needs. And submitted projects may not be added to the final RTP project list due to these financial constraints, or new projects may come at the expense of projects that are already in the plan. But long-range and vision projects that aren't ready to be included in the RTP can be included in our comprehensive transportation plan. So there's a mechanism for us to keep these on the radar and get them ready to move into the RTP as they become ready to move forward. So I'd like to take a few minutes just to walk through the transportation project development process, just for some context. Here's a graphic that shows how a major project idea can move from just being a concept to actually being implemented. So one of the first steps is getting a project idea into a local long-range planning document, like a general plan, our comprehensive transportation plan, or maybe even an area-specific plan or a capital improvement plan. So if the project is regionally significant, or if it's a big, expensive project on the regional transportation network, it can be submitted and potentially added to the regional transportation plan, like I said, which is updated every 4 years. So there are opportunities as part of this cycle to do that every so often. As the project continues to move forward and is recommended for funding, it will usually be added to the state TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program. And finally, as the project is fully funded and is being implemented, it's considered a committed project. So here's another way of looking at how a project may filter through these different development processes. Projects start out in this blue area, the universe of all transportation ideas. So this represents projects that are conceptual and kind of longer term, and that may show up in our CTP and general plans. As projects move forward and are developed further, they can move into the magenta area there. And this represents projects that, as I said, are developing, there's more detail, and they're ready to move into the fiscally constrained long-range plan, or RTP, or Plan Bay Area in our case, here in the Bay Area. As a project continues to be developed, it could move further along, and as it is recommended for federal, state, and regional funding, it would move into the orange or yellow category there. And be included in the TIP, or again, the Transportation Improvement Program. And then finally, as it's fully funded and implemented, it move into the green area and be considered a committed project. And a committed project in the context of the regional transportation plan is still in the plan, but it isn't counted against the future revenue estimates. So it's out of that mix. So getting over or talking a little bit about the programmatic categories. So this is a way of really looking and considering those smaller and local projects within the regional transportation plan. They represent collections of similar transportation projects that are identified by a single listing. So examples includes things like minor roadway improvements, complete streets and safety projects, clean vehicle initiatives, transportation demand management programs, and other project groupings. So this provides some flexibility in representing a diverse range of local projects in the plan, and it gives a way to actually include those types of projects in the larger regional planning framework. So in many of the local Sonoma County projects that we have here, they're smaller a lot of times than these big regional projects, and that's a way that we can actually represent them in the plan. So here's a list of the recommendations. So the TAC and Transit TAC met and reviewed projects from the last plan. This list and provided recommendations on what we should recommend to MTC. The list includes 4 carryover projects, 2 of which have moved into the committed category. So the 2 SMART projects, Smart Service to Windsor and the North Petaluma Station, are in that committed category since they're fully funded and being implemented. And 2 are carryover. And then there's 1 new project recommendation that was submitted by the city of Petaluma, which is the Caulfield Bridge Crosstown Connector Project. So one other recommendation is that we express our support for a number of projects being submitted by our regional partners at SMART and MTC. One of which is SMART fixed rail service from Windsor to Healdsburg and Healdsburg to Cloverdale, including the multi-use pathway. Also supporting SMART submissions of east-west rail service and MPC's submissions of Highway 37 corridor and interchange improvements. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up and just ask the board to consider authorizing staff to forward the recommendations of these 5 projects onto MTC for consideration, and including in the regional transportation plan, and also authorizing us to support these other regional projects that are being submitted by our partners at SMART and MTC. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things back over to you, Mr. Chair, and the board.
All right, thank you so much. Start with questions from the board. I'll start with Rosa, then go to Ariel.
You might want to go back to the slide.
Okay.
Can you just, I'm sorry if I didn't catch this, but what's the difference between this slide and the previous? What if could I request moving some of those to this list?
These are projects that SCTA will be recommending to be included in the plan. These are projects that SMART and MTC are taking the lead on that we just like to express our support in including in the regional transportation plan.
I'm sorry, can you just explain what's the difference? What's the difference? Why couldn't these be on the other one? That's my question.
Because they're multi-county, and so they have multi-county sponsors. And so we're supporting them, just like we're supporting Petaluma, but Transportation Authority of Marin would support them too, and they go on they're a regional project. So it's not lesser or greater, it's just multi-county.
Sonoma County only versus probably in our case, mostly Sonoma, Marin, and other additional counties.
Yeah, and
am I making it worse for?
No, that's fine. And I think part of it is kind of how we submit the projects technically. There's a form that actually needs to be filled out with project details like schedule and budget and specifics on the project. So our partners at SMART really have all those details really dialed in. So they could forward those onto us to forward onto MPC, or they could do it themselves. So what we've done here is we've collected all the information for those local projects on that first slide. And we'll send those sheets and project forms to MPC. And then basically just express our support for those project forms and sheets that SMART and MTC are submitting for those other large multi-county projects.
Just as a follow-up question to that, so on the list of projects that we're recommending SCTA consider, there are in existence on here two SMART projects, one service to Windsor and the other is the North Petaluma Station. So I don't understand, as you're saying, it's multi-jurisdictional or it's multi-county, or say, for example, SMART service from Windsor to Healdsburg, which we're recommending SMART submit and we support, versus these other two SMART projects that are specifically on our county list for FBTA.
Right. Yeah, I think the distinction here is these are underway projects that are considered committed. So there's not really any action that needs to be taken. They basically just move into that category in the RTP. And then once they're completed, they'll drop off the list.
Did you want to add something? Sorry.
No, I mean, I think, I don't know why those are on the list here as opposed to a regional list. I honestly don't know. Other than they are located in Sonoma County, but.
Is there magenta?
And I would just say, like, as a follow-up to that, I think the reason why they're magenta or why they're committed or why they have an asterisk in our agenda packet is because SCTA put them on the SCTA list. And I think that what we've seen in the past is when they aren't on our list, while we support them, sometimes those other projects don't rise to the level of importance when other agencies submit them to the regional list.
Yeah.
Suzanne, if I can ask too, because I remember pieces of this over the last couple of years. If I remember correctly, this list, we only had so much that we could recommend and subscribe, but that our partner agencies had a different funding amount. These ended up in our plan. The other ones ended up outside of the scope because otherwise to include them, we would have oversubscribed for the amount that we were told to plan for.
That is accurate. And we're not at that stage yet. So at some point next year, there's going to be a discussion about budget. And so our committed projects, good news is we get that budget back, hopefully. And so then we figure out if we keep these projects or we add the regional projects if we have to, or we get the region to commit regional money plan money for the RTP. So this is saying we endorse as SCTA all of these projects. They're in two, I don't know, buckets or pages of the plan right now, or they're in 2 pages of like submittals based on who the sponsors are. The discussion about what gets ultimately included is going to come back to the board in early next year.
So remind me of we're being fiscally constrained is a suggestion at this point in time. The top 2 projects are 888 million. That we're comfortable with going forward with 888 million. SMART's going to go forward with the other whatever the other page adds up to. But there's no difference in terms of the consideration by MTC, whether it came from SMART or whether it comes from SCTA.
That's correct. Yeah. And we haven't received the financial estimates or anything yet. So we're not even to that point.
So it'll be put together in an entire package. Who the sponsor is less important than the analysis of the fiscal constraint which is quite frankly where, at least on the, I don't know about not Windsor, but the Healdsburg and perhaps Cloverdale.
And there's another assessment that's going to be going on over the next 6 months or so. I believe we've spoken about this in the past, the performance assessment, which basically takes a look at the project and how it aligns with the goals and objectives of Plan Bay area. So that'll be in the mix as well. So at some point, we'll be able to see those results. We'll be able to see the fiscal projections and financial analysis, and there'll be a chance in the next year to take a look at that and distill this down. So at this point, MPC is just looking for okay, what did you have as part of the last plan? What are new major projects that haven't been included that are moving forward that, you know, are these big regional projects that you'd like us to consider? They'll go back and do their analysis and they'll let us know what they, you know, the results of that analysis at some point, as well as those financial projections, right? And they're telling us that revenue is expected to be lower with higher needs, unmet needs. So at some point, we'll need to bring an item back to you and say, hey, this is the budget. These are the projects. What are the priorities? So that's still coming. We're not to that point quite yet. And it would be nice if we had that up front, but we don't. So at this point, we're just submitting projects that we think are priorities that should be considered, and then we'll be able to do that sort of activity later this year.
Thanks. Any additional questions? All right, let's go to public comment.
Yes, I'd like to say something. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, and congratulations on the projects that you're putting forward. But I would also ask you once again to have some real strong oversight on this Hearn Avenue project, because there's a tendency as things begin to have cutbacks that something might not get done. Hearn Avenue has to be done. Along with that, I mentioned earlier Todd Road and Bellevue Road. You don't know Bellevue probably, but it's a perfect spot to have a crossover of 101. Todd Road already has one that's very antiquated and needs to be repaired. It's the kind of thing that I hope doesn't take another 25 years like Hearn Avenue did. Bellevue Avenue could be the perfect site to have a really nice overpass and a situation where you could work with SMART to have a South Santa Rosa stop. Myself and others from Roseland had advocated that SMART have some sort of a stop that could help the people of South Santa Rosa, the working class folks that commute down to Marin, to be able to use that train that we were told was going to be for commuters. I don't see many people from our area doing that. As a matter of fact, about 3:30 to 4 in the morning, the roadway begins to fill up with people going south in Craftsman trucks, people doing their stuff, going down to Marin, doing all that stuff. And then the freeway is all packed up by 7, all the way up through 9:30 typically. So I'm hoping that you'll at least somehow get this on the list, that Bellevue Avenue needs an interchange that could somehow be a multimodal situation with a SMART rail stop in South Santa Rosa. Then the rebuild of the Todd Road overpass, and near and dear to my heart for the last quarter of a century, the Hearn Avenue overchange. Thank you kindly for your time.
Drew, any additional comments?
Yes, we do. We have Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve, I've managed to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chair Rogers and members. Steve Bertelbaugh again with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. I think there are a couple of matters that are going on at the state level that we ought to pay a little bit of attention to, because they may have an impact on all of the available funding. When SB 1 was passed, it allocated funds to various what we call colors of money. And it's turning out now that we're looking to reduce vehicle miles traveled rather than increase them. Some of those funds are being spent in ways that don't reach the goals we want. So I think we're probably going to be asking for your support to get changes in SB 1, which are going to be very difficult, but we need to change the allocation of state funding so that we can focus on getting people out of cars, onto bicycles, onto their feet, and get the reductions in vehicle miles traveled that are necessary. Let's just keep that in the back of our minds. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board then. Ariel?
Thank you. I want to state my serious concern about this list and the conversations that we've had at the last iteration of submitting projects for our Plan B area list. As mentioned, that we are not in the phase of this where we are looking at a constrained project list, where we're looking at a fiscal limitation. Right now, we're in the, what is Sonoma County's wish list? Please submit it to MTC. And I do know that MTC will give much greater deference, because they have historically, to the projects that are on SCTA's list. So while I completely understand the sentiment that SMART can submit and will submit the Healdsburg extension, I don't think that it will be treated the same way, because I think that SCTA carries a greater amount of weight and priority when we put something on our list. And so I understand that we might not be able to fund all of these things, and there will be constrained numbers in the future, and we'll have to have that conversation at a later date. But I would strongly urge and request that we consider including the Smart to Healdsburg segment in the SCTA list when we submit it now.
Rosa?
Another lens to look at it and think about this is, as we previously talked about, passing tax measures, and, do our taxpayers that are voting, do they trust us? Do they have confidence? And people have been waiting for this SMART train to make it all the way to Cloverdale. So for me, whatever we can do to support that and elevate that, I really think we should. Thank you.
Melody?
I realize that we're somewhat in early days, but I have to agree with my colleagues. I think that unfortunately, so much of the conversation about going to Cloverdale, we'll never get to Cloverdale. Of course, we're about to get to Healdsburg. And with that bridge, the bridge at the Russian River at Healdsburg, what it does is it actually, in addition to opening up service to some of our most isolated city in Sonoma County, what it also does is it actually gives the SMART agency access to its real estate that it owns. And personally, I understand the difference between funded projects and unfunded projects. I don't really need to have that explained to me yet again by board members or staff. But what I do understand is that when we have a transit agency in MTC who is functionally, it's existing in its current state, rolling in MTC and ABAG together as a result of SB 375. And what SB 375 was designed to do was to coordinate transportation and housing. It was not designed to funnel money away from rural areas that are historically underserved and funnel that money to urban centers. That was not the intent. It was also not in the intent to disenfranchise agencies from access to their own property. And when we talk about when we talk about SCTA committing to supporting SMART to Cloverdale, what we're talking about is this agency supporting SMART having access to its assets, the taxpayers having access to their property. And for that reason, I'm in alignment with my colleagues from Healdsburg and Windsor. In addition to that, I think that what we're seeing in Healdsburg with the discussion of where their depot is going to be located, you're finally seeing the community that probably didn't have a lot of faith that SMART was going to get to Healdsburg, and it's coming. And now they're shuffling around and saying, well, gee, do we stick to a plan that was created before 2000, or do we truly look at our other options? And what they're looking at, not only where do they put the station in their downtown, they're realizing that they're the northern terminus for all of the parking. And if their station is anywhere located in downtown, they're going to have an increase of cars in their downtown. What we have to start doing at SCTA is not just looking at, oh, well, you know, you don't have a population, so you don't have any money. So there isn't enough money to get to you. We can't justify spending the money because of your city's low population. What we have to start looking at in all of our transportation agencies as they are part of a greater system. SMART is really only going to work when it has access to its double track in Geyserville. SMART is really only going to work when it has access to Cloverdale's Northern Depot, which already has a park and ride. And so I would like us to shift our conversation and how we think about how we represent Sonoma County's interests at MTC to reflect the working of our transportation systems, not constantly justifying everything by what the population is. Because I think it has been given too much weight. And honestly, I don't think it was ever the intent of SB 375. So for that reason, you know, I would like to see us move it. I would like to see SCTA sign on wholeheartedly with support for SMART to Cloverdale.
Any additional comments from the board? Sandra?
As I said earlier, as a joke, the only trains we have in Sonoma is Train Town. Just thought I'd share that with you. But we do have train tracks in Sonoma. In fact, Suzanne and I collected a check on some train tracks on 121 and 8th Street East. So it's not like it's impossible. Somebody at some point thought it was important to put train tracks in Sonoma. So anyway, seeing that we're nowhere near the list, I'm just going to say that I would support all of the northern extensions, Cloverdale, Windsor, Healdsburg, because you know, the sooner that everyone in the county feels like SMART is all the county, the sooner we're going to have people riding it and supporting it and being willing to extend it to Sonoma Valley and Sebastopol. Thank you.
I agree. We sit here with colleagues and I want to support the North. If we think that even by listing it on the other list, you know, they get more notice. I agree with that. So let's go ahead and try to figure out a way to add them, even if it's like budget not secure or some sort of language.
So if I can ask, tell me what the practical implication is of moving them from one list to the other.
You know, that's one suggestion I was going to make, that we just consolidate the list at this time, you know, with the understanding that at some point we'll be able to come back and consider the fiscal constraints and the performance assessment and, you know, make some decisions at that point. So if it would please the board, I could consolidate both of those lists into one single list that we could forward on to MTC and basically just indicate that those are priority projects for the SCTA that we'd like considered in the RTP.
Yeah, because I remember this discussion when we first had it, and the question at the time was which projects are going to be ready to break ground within the 5-year cycle. That's what kept certain things off the list. If what you're saying is that we don't have that same constraint in the list that we're sending, I'm comfortable with combining the two lists into one SCTA list. I'm not seeing any objection from the board.
I would like to make.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just ask for clarification? Are you suggesting that we also include the SMART East-West rail service cost TBD and the MTC corridor SR 37, which is a $6.8 billion line item, to the consolidation of the list?
I'd recommend including just the rail service to Cloverdale in our list and including a support position on those, the Highway 37 and the east-west rail services and off that combined list.
Okay, I concur with that. Thank you for clarifying.
I'm going to go Vice Chair David and then Janice.
Fully support the extension. And I also just want to acknowledge that, I mean, this was how it was sold to voters and this was a promise that was made. And I just don't like the idea of basically saying, uncle, we give up. We're not even going to sort of pretend to put it on the list. Like, you got to have a goal. You got to work towards it, whether or not funding is there. Like, we need to keep prioritizing that. My question is regarding the sort of east-west service. Sort of, is there like a status update in terms of an assessment or an analysis, taking place through SMART on that? Because obviously that's something that I'm keenly interested in, or even quite frankly, bus rapid transit service that could, get out to the lower Russian River. There were conversations in the past, and there was a study done on like a Fulton stop or other things that could better kind of create that east-west corridor, because Fulton's kind of that place where it branches off, towards both the east and the west.
David?
I think there is a bit of a, if you have the two lists, well, SMART's still going to submit what they're going to submit. We're going to submit now a couple more SMART projects on our list, which quite frankly makes it more likely that, and I think what will happen at MTC, and MTC is not a transit agency, it's a planning agency. And the fiscally constrained aspect is a federally mandate, or actually it wasn't federally, it was Therese did that, correct? It's federally. Okay. I know that Therese was part of that administration that brought that forward. But we're stuck with that. And what happens with that is numbers do matter, because what you're competing against, for instance, is a BART to San Jose or the downtown extension, which now with downtown at 35% vacancy is dropping down that list. But it is fiscally constrained at some point in time. I do think that MTC will award SMART a project, SCTA a project. And if you morph the two, you're kind of giving up pointing towards one project and letting them make that decision. Just something to think about. I think it doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter who the sponsor is. And that was what I was trying to say earlier. But if this board feels compelled to go in that direction, so be it. But I do think it'll, with 10 projects, it'll change the way that the luck of the draw will come down about which project will advance, in my opinion.
And I apologize, Chris, did you have any answer or comment for the vice chair's question?
I would like to just direct you to the transit improvement, the transit headway improvement project that's included as one of the projects. That does include headway improvements and service improvements for Sonoma County Transit as well, which I do believe includes some service improvements to the Russian River area.
And where would I find the full information on that?
In our comprehensive transportation plan, yeah, we can.
But that doesn't talk about east-west rail, or that's just like east-west rail access?
That is bus service.
Okay,
yeah.
But I thought this was like potentially east-west rail.
Highway 37, where there's existing.
Okay, so you're not ever talking about actual west. Okay, all right, good clarification. Thanks.
Exactly.
But west of 101? No.
David and then Janice and then Sandra.
I forgot to mention this too, because I brought the argument up about what the taxpayers desired and voted for here in Sonoma County, and was immediately shut down by my colleagues in the East Bay. When you talk about BART took 20 something years to get to Pleasanton, Dublin, in those stations over in that location, or even San Mateo in the extension going. The county has been paying into the sales tax for decades without seeing anything. So that, again, while it's great that a jurisdiction has support of the populace, it doesn't necessarily mean that then is going to create the project or the dollars that will flow from the region.
Janice?
So basically I got clarification because I didn't know that we had, at one time we did have rail that went to the west. Yeah, and so that was good clarification. But, I really do think we need to go, finish up north. I mean, Cloverdale was the first station that was done how many years ago? And every time you drive by it, you just see it sitting there. And I think the public, that's what they really voted for. And I think we need to move forward and make this happen. Certainly in my lifetime, I'd like to see this happen and maybe have a few extra years with it also.
Sandra?
I certainly understand the situation with the East Bay and how long it took. And I was around when all of it began. But I want all of us to be able to say to our constituents in Sonoma County that we're going to bat for them. And if somebody else from the East Bay turns us down, then so be it. But I'm not going to take their argument over our argument. So let them say no, we say yes, and we still keep that argument, and we go back to our constituents saying we're fighting for Sonoma County every single time. So hell with East Bay people. Sorry.
And to be clear, that wasn't my point,
No.
because, you know, and I assure you that the problem is we're outvoted. We have less representation because it's population based, so therefore the dollars are going to flow in that direction. And again, as we talked about before, Suzanne has been great about getting together the 4 North Bay counties. We've been good about being on the same page, making sure that we have carve outs are the best thing that happened to us. Pulling, you know, punching above our weight and pulling those dollars into the North Bay. All I'm saying is I made that same argument. That's the pushback you get. It doesn't mean that you're not fighting for your jurisdiction. Of course it does, going forward.
Chris?
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation. I don't think there's any doubt that anybody in this room does not support getting to Cloverdale. We voted for that 2008, 70% of the voters. Even Marin County was in favor of that. That's what we promised. That's what I promised. That's what I want to do. This to me is more about how we put this forward to the people that we're looking for funding from. And I want to support what the 3 of you brought up over there. At the same time, I'm worried about what Supervisor Rabbit suggested, that when MTC sees this as one list, that they're going to take one thing off of it. So I just want to ask staff, number one, have you talked to SMART about these lists? Is this what they're recommending as well, for their efforts to get all the way north to Cloverdale? And do you believe that we have a better chance one way or another, putting it all together or keeping it as you have it?
Right, yeah, thank you for those clarifying questions. So on the communication with SMART issue, we have coordinated very closely with them, and they are planning on submitting all the detailed information on, you know, timing, budget, all of that type of information. So I think we could still have them do that since they do have those details. And as we submit, you know, our simple list, basically just indicate that SMART will provide the details, but that both of those projects are priority projects for the SCTA board, along with those other projects. Going to whether, you know, the weight that holds, you know, us advocating for that and including it on our list, along with SMART submitting it as well. I don't believe SMART is planning on submitting a list. They've gone to the SMART board many, many times, and you know that they're have direction to advocate for that project. So, you know, I think we've made a lot of progress over the year, and it's been difficult, right? They continually push back, and the financial constraints are pretty severe. And I imagine there's going to be a hard decision to be made here again at some point in the next 6 months to 8 months or so, when we get those numbers back from MTC again. And, you know, I believe if we keep pushing forward and at least get as much as we can in the plan, I don't think there's a lot of danger in prioritizing that in a list we submit, with, you know, SMART submitting it as well.
All right, then I'll support what's on the table in front of us now.
Okay, any additional comments? How about a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we advance the project list for the regionally significant projects for consideration and inclusion in Plan Area 2050 plus, with the inclusion of the SMART fixed rail service, both Windsor to Healdsburg and Healdsburg to Cloverdale on the SCTA list.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you very much.
As a quick time check for the board, it's 4:15, and I know a couple folks do have to get to council meetings. So let's try to make sure we get through the 2 action items that remain with a quorum. And then if we slip below a quorum, we can't take any action, but we can still receive or listen to reports from staff. So let's try to get through these next 2 items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This item before you today is the 2024 State Transportation Improvement Program. This is a program that comes through the state, and every 2 years we receive new funding. This is for about 16.2 million in fiscal years 27, 28, and 2029. Staff looked at our lists of existing projects, working with our local jurisdictions, and determined that the best way to move forward on this was perhaps to do something creative. And in this case, SCTA has funding set aside in the Highway 101 Measure M program for landscaping work throughout the corridor. Now that the widening of 101 is complete, we're working on trying to move forward with that and working with consultants on an updated feasibility study to come up with the cost for the entire corridor. What we're proposing to do for this today, with your approval, is to exchange 9 million of Measure M 101 funds with 9 million of the State Transportation Improvement Program funds, or STIP. The STIP funds have a lot of administrative burden. They're hard for our local agencies to use, and Measure M is much cleaner funds and easier for the local agencies to be able to use in their local projects. So we're proposing that $9 million of Measure M funds be made available in the future to our local agencies for their projects. In turn, $9 million of STIP funds would be used for the landscaping between Cotati and Windsor, where we're finding the cost estimates for those segments, but we anticipate that that is a reasonable amount based on historic projects that have been done in the corridor. I'll be coming back to you with further information on that in coming months. The next recommendation for the STIP funds is 3.1 million for the final design phase of the State Route 121 East project in the eastern part of the county. That'd be also in fiscal year 27-28. In the previous STIP cycle, we had a loan repayment. We were able to defer to MTC. That funding is now on the Hearn Avenue Interchange project, which is open for bids right now and be closing bids on October 4th. If we're able to defer that loan repayment to MTC again, we would propose that we would use that 3.4 million for the right-of-way phase of the State Route 121 East Street East project as well. Lastly, the final recommendation for the STIP programming is about 650,000 for SCTA staff time over the next few years to work on STIP projects and other projects on the highway system. I should note that the 9 million of Measure M STIP fund exchange that we're proposing to you today would be combined with the 20 million we will have available in Regional Measure 3 North Bay Transit Access Improvement Program funds. And together that 29 million, we'd be coming back to you sometime early next year to talk about what projects from our existing list of projects that were submitted by local agencies would be recommending for programming. And with that, I turn back to you, Mr. Chair, to see if there's any questions from the staff recommendation.
All right, any questions from the board? Let's go to public comment. Okay, I'll bring it back and look for a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Director Harvey and a second by Director Cater Thompson. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carries. Let's move on then to item 8.4, future of regional transit service and funding. Yeah, you take that microphone back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next item is sort of two issues wrapped into one. As you know, Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District provides regional bus service in Sonoma County along the Highway 101 corridor from Santa Rosa South. And SCTA in turn provides Golden Gate per a regional requirement from MTC from 1996 that we must allocate 25% of our Transportation Development Act or TDA funds collected in Sonoma County to Golden Gate for regional service serving Sonoma County. There are two items that are sort of ripe for discussion and wanted to get board direction and have discussion today. So staff is seeking guidance on how it should engage in the Golden Gate Bridge District's strategic planning process. They will be convening a workshop with transportation partners in next week, actually. And I think we should consider, staff's recommending we provide some comment on preferred service levels, costs, transparency of data, which is a big topic, quite honestly, overall performance metrics, and other related items. Second to that, the SCTA will be bringing to you in the spring. Usually it's in April, the fiscal year 24-25 coordinated claim for transit. As part of that effort, we have committed to SMART to reassess how STA funds, another transit source of money, is distributed. And it seems a really good opportunity to have a more robust discussion about how TDA funds are distributed as well. And so would like to have direction from the board on how to proceed with that and what process we might want to develop. The 25% commitment of TDA funds to Golden Gate is as prescribed by the MTC resolution, also states that all parties must agree to change that formula, meaning Golden Gate Bridge District, MTC, and SCTA. That could be challenging to get at least one of those three parties to agree. So I think it does require, that'd be the recipient party. I think it requires MTC's sort of direct engagement as they proceed with regional network management efforts and allocation of fiscal cliff funds that are directed towards transit agencies who've been impacted by COVID. So that's kind of a lot as just to kick off, but those two issues really are intertwined and relate to the level of service that Golden Gate is providing currently compared to what they previously provided. We've gone from 10 routes down to 2 as funds available to the Bridge District have increased pretty significantly. If we were to reconfigure those percentages or base them on performance metrics, or at least be able to analyze data about who's riding and from where. We don't have great data on how many people are getting on and off in Sonoma County. We get it sporadically, but it makes it very challenging to have a discussion about the value of the service, how it interacts with SMART. Now that we have another regional service along that corridor with SMART, how can they complement each other? And what's the Bridge District's level of commitment of bridge toll funds? Because that is supposed to be part of the equation, that toll revenues help pay for the transit service. Yes, that does include ferry service, but also bus service. So as we sort of enter these discussions, I would be eager to have the board's sense of things, or if you have thoughts or guidance, we are looking for that today.
All right. I'll start by saying if our representative on one of those boards has any questions or comments to start with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much. And actually, I'm in favor of having this discussion. The executive director and I have talked about this a number of times, and I've talked to Dennis Mulligan, the general manager of the bridge, a number of times as well. And I think Dennis welcomes the conversation as well. And I think from Dennis's perspective, and I've told this to Suzanne, it'll want to be a comprehensive discussion about all sources of funds, because I think there's some other issues that are going on as well. I will tell you this, I think the bridge, and I'm right now the chair of finance at the bridge, and as a 13-year bridge board director, the bridge traffic is down in the AM PM peak about 30%. It's down overall about 15%, so it's actually up. Well, comparison, it's up in midday. The problem is that San Francisco, while remote work is taking some certain percentage of that, San Francisco's vacancy rate downtown is between 30 and 35%. And from the bridge, and I can tell you this through the discussions that we just had at our strategic plan meeting, we don't think that San Francisco will remain at 30 to 35% office vacancy forever. It will bounce back and recover. It has been at that number in the past, and it has recovered. Prices will adjust and all the usual economics will take place, but there will be a recovery when the recovery actually takes place. And the reason I mention this is I do think that the remote, when we're trying to morph out what's the impact of remote work in terms of transit ridership versus what's the impact of San Francisco being shut down essentially, or having all those vacancies. There's two, and I think the bridge is not quite ready to figure that out yet because the information is still coming in. And the strategic plan that we're doing this cycle is different than the strategic plans that we have done in the past. And that's really because of the president of the board's desire to include some other items within that. Usually, because the bridge has no other taxing authority and it's solely dependent upon tolls, fares, and obviously grants. It's our strategic plan is usually always financial. So I'm chair of the finance section of the strategic plan, which really talks about every idea in the world, including charging pedestrians to cross the bridge, which always gets shot down. But you know, if 10 million people walk across the bridge, and if you charge them a quarter, it's a lot of money. So you have to put it on the table, to cutting expenses. And the bridge historically into the ridership, bus ridership, because of the fact that we don't have any other outside authority or outside taxing authority, has always been pretty nimble to cut transit trips, bus trips, where the average falls below a certain number. In the past, pre-pandemic, that was always 20. So we'll, if a route's not working, we're not going to run empty buses. That changed during the pandemic, and we ran empty buses and we ran empty ferries because we received all the federal money to keep us going, which we still are spending and will spend into the next fiscal year going forward. So I say all this because I think we're open to that discussion. I think it might be, from the bridge's perspective, it might be premature to make an assumption about what the recovery will be. And I will say, as someone who lives in the South County in Petaluma, whose wife worked in San Francisco for 39 years and has a connection and even have kids take the bus to the city, as the further you go south in the county, the more dependent you are on Golden Gate Transit, because you are trying to get into the city. And Golden Gate Transit does relieve some of the local transit agencies' late night ridership as well, because they'll run later, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a discussion to be had. So I'm all in favor of that. But I just thought I'd throw out there. I look forward to whatever the body wants to throw into the strategic plan. I can tell you right now that it's just a compilation of lists of about 10 pages of different ideas, bullet points, and it'll probably be morphed down, brought to the board. And in that fashion, it's a little different than what one might do in another entity's kind of strategic plan. But that's the way that it's historically have been done, and it works for the bridge in that sense. And I think that's it. So when you're ready, I'll make the motion to approve it.
Okay, Sandra.
Through the chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
On the list, I noticed today that they're going to be not replacement of Clipper cards, but allowing use credit cards to go through transit on the San Francisco ferry. But it didn't mention the Golden Gate ferry, which I'm again one of those people lives in the southern part of the county. I'm in the city all the time for work. I take the ferry, love it. Is there going to be the use of credit card instead of Clipper card for the Golden Gate ferry? Because it seems to me, I was just there this week, or I guess it was last week now. I'm sorry. And there were people fumbling around again, figuring out the machines and whatever. And it seems to me that would be something that would be encouraging to people to take the ferry.
So who is it? WIDA that allows the credit card purchases? Are they different?
I don't know.
I'm not sure, but it was, so it's like BART and San Francisco ferry and but it didn't say Golden Gate ferry. So I'm just saying that could be something that might increase ridership.
Well, I know we're on Clipper.
Yeah, you're on Clipper, but this is like, you don't have to use your Clipper card. You just pull out just like you can do in Europe. You just pull out your regular old credit card and then there you go, you're on.
Well, I'm sure that's going to be on our list. If not,
I'm just adding.
this body could add it.
Director Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. These numbers are pretty astonishing in terms of, seeing nearly a 60% drop in ridership from Sonoma County, 10 routes going down to 2 routes, but we're giving them 50% increase in our funding for transit service. And I think that we haven't looked at this, or this has been in place since 1996 before SMART existed, is you know, clearly this should have been looked at a long time ago. I remember when we were sitting here during COVID and we weren't sitting here during COVID, we were sitting on Zoom during COVID, thinking about sitting here. And we were looking at the recovery funds that came, the federal recovery funds during COVID, and we gave $10 million of Sonoma money to Golden Gate Bridge to help with their recovery so they could run empty buses so that they didn't have to lay off drivers and providers. And I respect that those were difficult decisions that providers had to make during the pandemic. But at the same time, that amount of money, $7.8 million that we're currently paying to Golden Gate Bridge, that money could go a really long way in Sonoma County for our Sonoma County Transit or Petaluma Bus or Smart and Santa Rosa Bus as well. So I think this conversation is long overdue. I think if the public in Sonoma County knew how much of our local transit dollars were going to Golden Gate Bridge with 2 routes of service right now, I think that people would be really disappointed, to put it mildly. And so I think this needs to advance, and I think we need to be really strong about the great recovery in transit that we have had and our ridership numbers that look awesome. And I feel sad for the Golden Gate Bridge District that they haven't had that recovery. But I also think COVID really shifted the way people commute, the future of where people are headed on transit. And I think we need to be really mindful of that as we look at expanding our transit routes and getting money to our providers here. And these are funds that are desperately needed in Sonoma County for ridership that looks really good, that we have data for. And so I do think we need more data, to Suzanne's point, but I also think that this is obscene to me, frankly.
Melanie and then Susan.
I can.
Yeah, when I saw these numbers, it really struck me. I think it's really pathetic. We're paying double for 1/5 of what we're getting. This is one of the things that comes up from constituents, is how pathetic our Golden Gate Transit service is. And it's made it even worse when we get some of these developments that come in and they say, oh, well, but you're near a Golden Gate Transit stop. And it's just like, yeah, well, there's a stop there, but no one comes there. So this has been bothering people for a long time. I agree with my colleague that this is long overdue. This should have been addressed, and maybe it should have been addressed when Smart started, but this can't continue. I think once you get the data and you look at how much per one person riding, you are going to be astonished at how much money we're spending for a lot of nothing. So I agree.
Melanie?
Well, I think my colleagues have stated it very well, but what I would add is that, you know, I've used Golden Gate Transit, and people in these meetings have heard me talk about taking both Golden Gate Transit into the city by bus and also by ferry. And it's absolutely an essential service in our region. I'm not belittling that, but I do think that, you know, this is long overdue revisiting this for several reasons. And first of all is that I think that what we're seeing in Smart's ridership rebounding really tells the story of our region, in that we are now our own housing shed and our job shed. I grew up in Sonoma County. My parents didn't commute into San Francisco, but my friends' parents did, and they did it on Golden Gate Transit every single day. Those jobs just don't exist anymore. So when we look at our transit facts, and we see the ridership of Smart increasing, and the fact that the corridor, the most heavily utilized route on Sonoma County Transit is Route 60, which is Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Windsor, Santa Rosa. If I want to take the bus to from Cloverdale to Santa Rosa, which I do on a regular basis, it is 1 hour and 30 minutes. I have kids in Cloverdale at Cloverdale High School who can't get their AP classes. They attend a Santa Rosa Junior College, and they're at the mercy of, you know, hopefully maybe some of their families have cars. Many of them don't. They end up carpooling and taking the bus home. I used to personally pick up my friend's daughter. She would walk to, if it wasn't raining terribly hard, she would walk from the Cloverdale Plaza to my house, and then I would drive her across the river. to River Road outside of Cloverdale. That's what you have to do as a high school student in Cloverdale if you want to be able to take AP classes. And she graduated with honors from UC Davis with a math degree. So we're very proud of her. And so I get to take a little piece of responsibility for that, but it was the example of the fact that it takes a village. And those are the underserved folks in Cloverdale. Healdsburg and Windsor, when it takes you an hour and a half to get to downtown Santa Rosa, and we're sending that amount of money to Golden Gate Transit, it illustrates my earlier point, which is it's just a way to funnel needed money in rural areas for transportation to urban areas, and it has to stop. What I would really urge Golden Gate Transit to do is look very heavily at the resources that they already have. I hate to see public access, like one of the great joys of this area is walking across the Golden Gate Bridge. When you have visitors from outside the area, that's like one of the top things on our list. Bike across, walk across. I'd hate to see it monetized, but we're in a new era and we have to pay for that bridge somehow. The other unused access asset is the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. That, talk about empty parking lots, that whole area needs to be revitalized and possibly monetized. You should be the Golden Gate. You know, where has the Golden Gate Transit Authority been in partnering with the city of Larkspur and with the Larkspur Landing across the street and create a destination in that parking lot? I think that they have a number of assets that they have not been leveraging because they've just been getting money from places like Sonoma County. So change is definitely overdue. The last thing I'd say is that I think we use that phrase, like since COVID, we've seen jobs, you know, the patterns change. I think that those were patterns that were already happening and they were accelerated by COVID. So we can't ignore those trends any longer, and we need to make some serious changes in where we're sending our money.
All right, let's go to public comment. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Andy. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I love Golden Gate Transit. Been riding that bus system since it started, and it is definitely the best one-seat ride in the city, right? At the fairest price. And I don't think smart is something that is as a cure-all that folks here seem to think. All righty. Getting a microphone back, that is so rare. Thank you so much. Essentially, smart has been the problem with Golden Gate Transit, and no one wants to say that. Once it got into the mix, that started to detract from the ridership. The dilemma that we face right now is you don't have accurate numbers. So I do hope you will go forward and get accurate numbers. Once you get those accurate numbers, though, you should look into something called shortening the ride. Part of the problem for Golden Gate Transit is to go that 55 miles into San Francisco takes 2 hours and 20 minutes. 45 minutes of that typically is spent just sitting, waiting in stops as the driver just kind of fiddles and waits to do the next thing. In San Rafael, you can wait up to 15 to 20 minutes, just 13 miles away from the city, because that's the way the contracts are written with the drivers, etc. It's not a user-friendly system anymore. When I was young, it was great. And as you said it, the bus into the city, that's the way to do it. You do the smart train thing, you have to go take that ferry also. You have to pay essentially double to get to the same place and take longer to get there. So I can appreciate all the concerns for the folks up in Windsor, Healdsburg, and Cloverdale. I've been in Sonoma County most of my life, know most all those areas. And, you know, it's not like you've got a lot of folks who are going to be riding that smart train from Cloverdale down to wherever their jobs are. Santa Rosa, perhaps, maybe Marin. I just don't see it, and it needs to be proven. So that's where we need these documented facts and figures and have them be audited and vetted so you know they're correct, because many people don't trust smart. They think they're cooking the books. They think that smart basically pretends they're getting more riders than they actually have. Because I live right there on Hearn Avenue and I can stand there and watch the trains come by during the commute times with 5-6 passengers per train. I know something is not matching up with what we see in the numbers. So please do the most accurate accounting you can, the best auditing you can on this smart system, the Golden Gate Transit System. And then however the funds may be, perhaps they could be utilized to put more routes on the 2 existing routes that are left. So less time on the same routes. Thank you kindly for your time again. And what a wonderful day with the microphone so many times. It's a rarity. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Drew, do we have any other public comment?
Excuse me. No, I don't see any other members of the public on Zoom wishing to speak on this item.
All right, I'll bring it back for a motion from Director Rabbit.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Yes. All right, that concludes the action portion of our agenda. I know we have a couple of folks that need to slip out for their city council meetings. Madam Executive Director, we have reports and announcements, section 9 on our agenda. Do we have any reports and announcements for today?
Under item 9.4, Mr. Chair, the activities reports are included in your board packet if you want to just refer to them.
Okay. Let me go ahead and call for public comment for our reports and announcements.
Don't see any hands raised on Zoom.
All right, I'll bring it back then. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Way to go.